Hey everyone, and welcome to episode 4 of Let's Talk the Winchesters. And with me, once again, I have Carla from Carla Astrology. Hey, good morning, and thanks for being here.
Good morning.
And I'm just going to wait and see if we come up on YouTube. Yeah, it's starting, so we're all good. Okay, so episode 4. Today, I'm not gonna, I didn't prepare many screenshots today. I'm just gonna give a very quick recap. Once again, this is your spoiler warning. And the episode is called Masters of War. So what we're dealing with in this episode is basically backstory of John, also Carlos, a little bit of Mary and her family, but the main overall topic is veterans and PTSD. So that's what and their struggle with that, like how the experiences, what they go through, the kind of things that make it so difficult for them to live in this world after coming home from the war. And so the thing that Dean says in the beginning when he's narrating, he says, fighting the battle between good and bad isn't easy, especially when the first monster you have to face is the one inside yourself. And that is very true for most of the people, actually all of the people in this episode, everyone in the Scooby Gang, because they each have some secrets. They have things that they're not letting other people see, things that they don't talk about, things that they suppress, all of that. So in a way, they're all more or less, to certain degrees, struggle with PTSD in various ways. And we get to see some of that in this episode. So the story takes place in St. Joseph, Missouri, in Hannibal Park Hospital. And that's a hospital where they have therapy sessions for veterans to do group therapy, talk about their experiences, share, and help each other through that kind of stuff. And in that group, one person ends up dead, and of course the cause of death is very mysterious. So the Scooby Gang gets wind of that because, as we find out, Carlos was also in the war. He was in the Navy. He was a medic in the Navy task force, and he didn't go into the Navy on his own free will. He was arrested, so that was like a punishment for him. And so he also suffers from PTSD because he was also in the Vietnam War. And with all the things that he experienced there, he hasn't gotten over that. But at least he's willing to talk about it. And in between, we also find out that Mary and Lata are grieving a girl that used to live with the Campbells. Her name is Maggie, and I'm thinking she might be Mary's sister or something, or some family member. It's not explicitly mentioned in this episode, but yeah. And then we also see Millie, who is in the garage, her car shop, and she talks to John. And she also doesn't seem to be a very big fan of talking about feelings because she says that talk is cheap and actions are what matter most. And this is something that is very Dean, because as we know, like, we don't just get the traits or characteristics, behavior from our parents, we also get stuff from our grandparents. And so in this case, I can see a lot of Millie in Dean as well, because he was never one to really talk about his feelings until later in the show, when Sam got him to open up a little bit, and the whole relationship with Castiel got him to be a little bit more vulnerable. But that took some time to get there. And even if we look at young Dean, I mean, he has basically been brought up with PTSD because John, he never got over it, and then losing his wife and everything. So he basically threw Dean into that. Sam managed to kind of stay away from that, especially since he had Sully, his childhood invisible friend, his what were they called? Xana. And so he managed to kind of get away from all of that. But John and Dean are very much in that PTSD thing. And one thing that Mary also says to John as they are on their way to investigate and go undercover in that group therapy session is that they always, or like as soon as they start blaming things on the mother, John is supposed to get out of there. And then he replies, well, we all know it's Dad's fault anyways. So even though they kind of joke about this, but there's a lot in that comment that we can psychologically dissect for probably an hour. And so, yeah, it's like they really speak like people who try to avoid talking about their feelings at all costs. And later in the episode, John and Carlos are actually facing the monster, and we learn that it is actually a god. His name is Mars Nito, or Nito, and he is a Roman god based on the god of Mars, or the god Mars, so the god of war. And he kills veterans in psych units all across the country, which Mary found out through this reporter that she knows. And so he mixes in with the patients to find a possible candidate to fight. And he has a reason for that, because he's not just randomly killing people. When he is faced with John and Carlos, he tells John that basically he is looking for someone to fight the Akrita. Neto knows that the Akrita are here, and that, yeah, he's basically looking for someone who can be his soldier, his apprentice, or whatever, in a way that he can train to fight against the Akrita. But John manages to kill him because even though he's a god and he's immortal, he does have an Achilles heel, and that is an object. Once destroyed, he can be killed. Oh no. And therefore they find this vase that is his totem, or whatever you want to call it. They destroy it, and so John is able to kill him. But it's not simply just killing him. It's actually overkill what John does, because even though Neto is already down, John keeps beating on him repeatedly, and so the blood splatters all over him. And yeah, so there's really a lot of suppressed anger and emotions that are within John that he should do something about, but we all know he doesn't really. So in the end, when we see Carlos and John take very different approaches to dealing with the situation, Carlos actually goes back into the therapy group, and he talks about his experiences, about his feelings, and he wants to get better, whereas John is completely shutting off. And we see him sitting in the shower fully dressed because he has all the blood on him, and he is just sobbing in the shower. And his mom eventually finds him there. And a moment that was so heartbreaking was she then gets in the bathtub and she's just holding her son while he's sitting there in the shower with the water running down. And so that little moment of her realizing that her son is completely broken that was so heartbreaking. So yeah, and we also got to know a little detail of like something that hasn't been discussed before. We actually now know how old John is. He seems to be 19 years old, because something that Millie said to the girls was that John has been a soldier since he was 4 years old. And so that must have been the time when Henry, his father, disappeared. So he's been gone for 15 years. That would make John 19. Also, in the beginning of the show, he said that he is now legal, but his mom said he's still not old enough to drink. So that puts him anywhere between 18 and 21, but now we narrowed it down to 19. So yeah, that was basically a short recap of what happened. So Carla, what do you think about this episode?
I thought that it was actually pretty decent. And of course, the end scene where he's in the shower, of course, I was all teared up too. So
yeah,
it was pretty good. It was pretty good. I have so much distraction going on right now. It's hard to focus.
Okay. So something that I also wanted to talk about is the attention to details in this show, which I personally think is like a make or break it kind of thing that distinguishes good shows from bad shows. And I have two screenshots today. So the first one, here we see the workout between Mary and John, and we see that the workout equipment, like whenever he punches those kickboxing glove thingies there's so much dust coming out of it. It's like every time he hits it, there's an immense amount of dust. And since Mary is the one holding them, like close to her face, she would be the one breathing that all in. So they can't even be bothered to clean the equipment before they use it. It looks like this has been like on the attic or in the attic for 10 years or in the basement. And in none of the martial arts movies or anything I've ever seen, I have witnessed anyone having dirty equipment like that. Even if it was, they would clean it and then use it. But this, why? What, especially to give us like a close-up shot of that. Like, why is it so dusty? Why don't they just clean that off before using it? This makes no sense to me. Seriously. And then another thing is the costumes when they go undercover. And in this case, they went into a hospital, and they were like in the hospital clothes and everything. Can you hold it a little bit further towards you? A little bit more? Yeah, stop. Okay, so what we see here is basically a fashion show and not people pretending to be doctors, because even though this is in the 70s, and the 70s were probably very laissez-faire, I cannot imagine for the life of me that any doctor would have had the hair open to make sure that the Farrah Fawcett blowout doesn't get ruined by this medical cap. And Lata, like the hair is open and everything. If they would have been real medical professionals, the hair would have been back in a ponytail or in a bun or whatever, in a braid, and the cap would have been worn the way that John has it, to make sure that the hair doesn't fall onto the patient or onto the equipment. I mean, this is very unhygienic for someone in a medical profession, and no doctor on earth would run around like this. This is basically, oh, let's put this on and make this look so that we all look nice with our hair and everything. Seriously? I mean, come on. That in no way does that make sense. Not at all. I mean, Sam and Dean, they were going undercover with a lot of different costumes, but they at least always made sure, or the people working on the show made sure, that everything looked the way that it was supposed to look. And I don't know who the people on this show are, but they don't seem to be paying attention to these kind of things, but they are important. Don't you think?
Absolutely. It's making me think that I don't know. Not a whole lot of time and energy was put into the whole display, definitely.
Or maybe it's not even like a question of time and energy, but like let's make sure our characters look good, and it's more about the appearance than their actual job in this moment. And I mean, I did like the details that they put into the guys' outfits, like when they were in their army outfits, and Carlos was in his navy uniform. Like that was on point. But with the girls and everything, it's just like, no, this was like going to a Halloween costume party where you don't need to take things so seriously and you just make sure that you look good, so that you're sexy and all. But it's no, this is posing as someone from a specific profession, so it should look like that. So
Yeah,
it seems that
absolutely.
I don't really have a lot of good things to say about the show by now. But I mean, I have one good thing to say, because in those 4 episodes, something that I really appreciate is the camera work and the lighting. So the cinematography of this show is actually really good. The people who work on that show behind the camera, and well, the directors for the most part, telling everyone where to stand, where to look, and all of that, and the shots back and forth between the people, that is done very well, and I really appreciate that cinematography.
Let me do it.
But yeah, when it comes to other things, especially the continuity between Supernatural and the Winchesters, I mean, something that I read, yeah, I don't know if I've already said this, but it's supposed to make sense in episode 13. I can't wait for that.
Yeah.
I also read that because of budget cuts for the CW network, they're going to leave season 1 at 13 episodes. They didn't get a back order for any more episodes of that season. And if there's going to be a second season is up in the air right now. That hasn't been decided just yet. So we will see what happens. And something interesting that we were wondering about is if they would bring any other characters from Supernatural back in this show. One has been confirmed. In episode 8, we will get to see one of our old acquaintances, Loki. Loki is coming back. And since there's 2 Lokis, there's the original Loki, and then there's Gabriel pretending to be Loki in Supernatural Witness Protection.
Oh,
so my guess is, because this is dealing with Sam and Dean's parents, and Gabriel just wants the apocalypse to happen, that this is going to be Gabriel as Loki and not Loki.
Oh.
So we will definitely get to see the trickster again. And I am really looking forward to that. So it's 4 more episodes until then.
Yeah.
I hope the other ones are not going to be too boring, because this was actually the first episode where I caught myself playing on my phone in the meantime while watching the episode and not paying too much attention. And that has never happened to me watching Supernatural.
Yeah, exactly.
Never in a million years would I have been caught playing on my phone while watching Sam and Dean. Never, ever. But with this show, it's kind of like, yeah, oh well. What's happening? Okay. So, I don't know. Like, I do care about details and continuity and those kind of things.
Can you hear me okay, Maria?
I can hear you, yes.
Okay. I do have to go.
Okay.
I have so much
let's
going
wrap this
on,
up,
but
because we basically said everything. Mwah. Thanks for being here. Till next time. Okay, so like I said, this is everything we talked about for this episode. Oh, one more thing that I found interesting, and I hope they will elaborate on that a little bit more, is that Neto actually said that John has centuries of violence in his blood, which is also something that leaves a big question mark for me, because if John comes from a family of legacies, and we know that the men of letters don't really choose the violent path because that's what they have the hunters for, or people like Ketch. I mean, he can only go back to like the very original, because Dean is a descendant of Cain, which is why he was able to bear the mark of Cain. And yeah, so in that sense, maybe that's what he was alluding to. But otherwise, John's immediate lineage with the legacies, it doesn't really have the violence unless you go back to the very beginning. So, yeah. So at the end, the god was pleased to have found his champion to fight against the Akrita. So we will see what happens with that, especially since John is keeping all of that bottled up and not doing anything about it. And yeah, so we'll see what happens in episode 5, and if we get any more interesting information about the characters or the Men of Letters or the Akrita. So until then, thank you for watching and see you next time. Bye.